power and everything, led by Ant-Man. Their best player is playing great defense, and the rest of those perimeter players.
That's great defense that time.
Kid Gilchrist, the only defender back. Resurgent!
On Kawhi! It is.
I don't know if I've ever seen this. Whoa!
So what I'm doing right now is I'm stalling.
The NBA is facing a big problem, and guess what? It's their own fault. Fans are finding it hard to watch the game because of this reason. What are we talking about? It's about the referee calls in the court. The way referees are making calls in NBA games is making it tough for fans to enjoy the action. It's getting so bad that some people are finding it hard to even watch the game anymore. And to top it off, players are getting ejected for reasons that just don't make sense. But what exactly is causing this mess? Defenses can't stop the offense, games keep stopping because of little fouls, no wonder the league is losing money. People pay good money to watch these athletes play, but they're not getting their money's worth. In a game against the Pistons in November, Giannis got a second technical foul for staring down Isaiah Stewart, and he got kicked out of the game. Trae Young got kicked out for clapping and disagreeing with the call. He got a technical foul, then the next night, Joey got ejected for just saying one word to the refs. But why is the NBA changing how they officiate games and making their own product less exciting? We don't like what the NBA is turning into. It used to be about tough players, but now it feels like they're trying to make it too soft. It's ridiculous. The referees and leagues should be ashamed for letting this happen. What's going on with the NBA these days? How come scoring 50 points in a game seems normal now? Back in 2010, only one player did it. In 2011, there were just 2, and then in the next year, there were just 3. But in January 2024, within just 1 week, 4 players scored 60 points, including Embiid with 70 and Luka with 73. It's not the players' fault. The league's rules are too lenient, favoring offensive players and teams. When Kevin Durant joined the Warriors in 2017, they already had 3 of the best shooters ever, so it wasn't a shock that they had the best offense in the league with a rating of 115.6. Their offensive rating in 2017 was the best ever in NBA history, but if you compare it to the league average in 2014, it would have ranked 18 points below. Why did their offense get so much better? Well, one big reason is that they started shooting more three-pointers and playing faster. But if we look back at NBA history, the speed of the game today is just okay. In 2024, the pace ranks 21st with 99 possessions per game. Back in the 70s and 80s though, the NBA was played at a crazy fast pace. In 1974, it was at its peak with 108 possessions per game. In the 60s, teams played even faster and usually had around 120 possessions per game, but those numbers aren't official. The NBA began tracking pace in 1973 when we checked the average points scored. The 2024 season comes in 6th in NBA history with an average of 115 points per game. But back in 1962, teams were scoring even more, averaging a crazy 119 points per game. That year, Wilt Chamberlain was averaging 50 points. Back then, 4 players were scoring over 30 points on average and 5 players were doing the same, but that hasn't happened again since. So when it comes to speed and scoring, today's NBA is just as fast as it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. These high-scoring games now might seem crazy, but only when you compare them to the really slow basketball of the 90s and 2000s. When European players first joined the NBA, they had a tough time fitting in because they didn't match the typical player styles that NBA teams were used to. If you check out the 2004 NBA Finals between the Pistons and the Lakers, the game was more like wrestling than basketball. Teams back then all had 2 big players and they fought hard to get close to the basket. Back then, players often got held when they tried to move towards the basket, but the referees didn't call it a foul because there wasn't a rule against it, known as hand checking. In the 2004 finals, the Pistons scored around 90 points per game while the Lakers struggled to reach 80. And in the 2005 finals between Detroit and San Antonio, the offense was even worse, with neither team scoring more than 86 points on average. After Jordan retired, fewer people were watching NBA games and the league was making less money, so they decided to change the rules to make scoring more exciting. In the 2001 season, they made some big changes. The main one was the defensive 3 seconds rule, which stopped big players from staying too long in the paint. They also made zone defense legal. In 2004, they reduced the time to cross half court from 10 to 8 seconds, and hand checking became against the rules. But even with those changes, as we mentioned earlier, scoring 50 points in a game was still rare. Plus, players were no longer wrestling off the ball like they used to because the referee started calling fouls if it got too rough, kind of like in MMA. The game was still pretty rough, especially in the playoffs. It felt like a fight sometimes. Teams would be down by a lot, like 20 or 27 points, and they'd keep fighting. It stayed that way for more than 10 years after they banned handshaking. The first NBA Finals where both teams scored over 100 points on average was in 2017, which hadn't happened since the 2000 Finals. But in 2015, when the Warriors won, everyone saw how important spacing and shooting three-pointers were. So in the next season, the Rockets, led by James Harden and Daryl Morey's analytics, focused on that strategy. They really pushed it to another level, and suddenly the NBA saw the biggest offensive change since they brought in the shot clock in 1954. Before 2015, NBA was pretty set in its positions. Players had specific roles, and while some would break out of them. Nowadays, players who can shoot are all over the place. This means there is more space on the court than ever before. Plus, players are really good at handling the ball. Most teams use pick and roll plays, even with big guys like Jokic or Giannis, and almost every player on the team is allowed to dribble or shoot. In the 80s, basketball was tougher, but now it can't compete with the styles of the 90s, 2000s, and today. Let's say we look at big players from the 90s who didn't shoot much, like Dennis Rodman. He'd still be a great defender today, but because he wasn't good at scoring, he wouldn't be very useful in today's NBA, with players being so versatile, no? The main reason the offense is so strong now is because of the fast pace, lots of space on the court, and players being really good. But the NBA also made it easier for the offense. But in truth, it just made it tougher for defenders to stick their opponents. Also, players like James Harden, Trae Young, and many others began looking for fouls. Harden was a leader in this, tricking defenders into reaching for the ball, then getting tangled up and drawing fouls. Since Harden started this, it's become even more common and problematic. In 2018, players started complaining about more than just ghost fouls. Referees also became more relaxed in moving screens, traveling, and carrying the ball, especially during fast breaks. This led to some crazy moves like LeBron's famous crab dribble or Harden's step-back three-pointer. It's not entirely the referees' fault that we often get confused about traveling in the NBA. Players have gotten really good at using every step they're allowed to take. You could say there's almost a travel log on every play. When the NBA started allowing a few extra steps, it became even harder to spot travels. The gather step has always been a part of the NBA, but now players take it to the extreme. They time when they pick up the ball just right. It's really frustrating to watch. We don't want to see players getting technical fouls for hanging on the rim for just a split second too long or for staring down an opponent. It's unbelievable. In the past, players could talk to officials. This raw emotion heats up the arena, sparks rivalries, and creates highlight reels for years. That's what fans love. Just imagine if Allen Iverson stepped over Tyronn Lue in 2024. He'd probably get ejected for taunting. Players are more talented and efficient than ever, but right now it feels like something is missing. It's like having a great meal at a fancy restaurant, but the chef forgot to add salt and pepper. No way am I eating that. So to answer the question from earlier, is it normal for NBA players to score this much? Well, if we compare it to the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the current scoring in the NBA is actually normal. Actually, it was the Jordan and Kobe era that was unusual, but the way the league is being officiated now just doesn't feel right. It's become way too soft. Thanks for watching. If you like this one, the next video might be even better. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. We'll catch you next time.